It's my great honor to introduce to you FEA President Andrew Spar.
We're the ones who teach the children, drive the buses, feed them too. We make buildings safe and clean, and in the office we come through. Yet some folks in Tallahassee don't care what we think or do, but our union makes us strong. That's my new verse for Solidarity Forever. A song that goes on to talk about how in our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold. A power that is stronger than any bureaucrat, any politician, or any evildoer. As one of the lines in the songs repeats over and over, our union makes us strong. It is our solidarity with one another, our ability to speak with one voice that gives us power. And of course, our power grows with each colleague we invite to stand with us in their union, and it grows stronger still when we stand with parents in the community demanding great public schools and a future full of possibilities for everyone. Yet here we are again, another election and another moment in which the future hangs in the balance. Every decision we make, our commitment to the cause of funding our future, and every opportunity we squander will have consequences that will last for years to come. It is time for us to be deliberate in our work, especially between now and November 8th. Like the lyric I opened with, it is clear that many politicians don't care what we think or do. And that disrespectful attitude has to change because it's manifested in the laws they pass and the policies they adopt. Laws and policies that have been starving our schools. Laws and policies that have destroyed our ability to ensure better schools. Laws and policies that have interfered with our ability to negotiate fair wages and benefits at the local level that systematically keep your pay low and our health care costs high. We, as a union, will never be able to buy the influence and respect of politicians. We don't have that kind of money. That hoarded gold that private corporations have. The only way to have any influence over these politicians is to use our collective strength and vote them into or out of office. I sometimes think that we fail to realize the power in our hands. What happens when we wield that power and what happens when we don't. So let's take a look and talk about 2010. Some of you may remember the 2010 legislative session, a true crisis moment in the history of our union. One of the most destructive anti-public education laws we had ever seen, Senate Bill 6, was passed by the legislature and sent to Governor Charlie Crist's office to be signed. Yet, Governor Crist, who was a Republican at the time, listened to us, the teachers, staff, and parents, and vetoed Senate Bill 6, showing more courage than he's ever been given credit for. 2010 was also an election year. So just a few months later, Florida voters, including our members and their families, would be choosing between lawmakers and a new governor who would make sure that legislation like Senate Bill 6 would never again see the light of day, or elect lawmakers who would pass it again and a new governor who would sign it into law. We all know what happened. Rick Scott, by just over a 1% margin, won the race for governor, and the House and Senate remained under the control of anti-public education legislators. Senate Bill 6, redrafted as Senate Bill 736, came back up and was passed by the legislature, with Governor Scott signing it into law. And every year since, laws have been passed and signed by Governor Rick Scott and then Governor Ron DeSantis, all of which limit our pay for support staff and experienced teachers in our public schools, limit our ability to stimulate free thought in our elementary schools, our middle schools, our high schools, and on our college and university campuses, and all but silence us when we dare to speak up for our students. It is often said that we can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result. But if we're truly honest with ourselves, that's just what we've been doing for years. At least to some degree, we've allowed ourselves and our members to be lured into this mindset that we should stay out of politics, close our doors, and just teach our kids. We bought the lie that politics doesn't have any impact on our jobs or the students, parents, and community we serve. We didn't push back on this false narrative. Even when we know it isn't true, we didn't respond with a constant and affirming message that in order to change how public education is handled in Florida, we must engage our colleagues in honest conversations. We must mobilize our members and their families to be educated, committed, and consistent voters. Politics doesn't impact us. Politics doesn't have anything to do with our jobs, our students, our communities. In 2010, average teacher pay in Florida ranked 36th in the nation. Today it ranks 48th. In 2010, funding for Florida's public schools was 40th in the nation. Today it's 45th. In 2010, we had the ability to speak up for our students and their families without the fear of losing our jobs because we had some degree of job security with continuing contracts. Today, most of Florida's teachers, including all new teachers, have been forced into annual contracts. In 2010, there was one law that governed pay. Today, there are over 20 different laws that govern pay, most of them punishing education staff professionals and experienced teachers. In fact, yeah, that's right. In fact, this group of laws has come to be known as the Florida Teacher Experience Penalty, meaning the more experience you have, the smaller your pay increase will be. Elections most certainly do have consequences. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can change until it is faced." We are facing the reality of our past, and we can change. We can get this right. I believe it not just because I'm an optimist, but because I have seen the change that FEA, this federation of 100 locals, has been able to make in just a few short years. In 2019, we had about 1,200 parents, community members, teachers, staff, professors, retirees, and administrators gather for our Bringing Voices Together convening. It was an extraordinary event where we focused on the power we have when we all unite for strong public schools And that meeting has reaped so many great changes. For instance, today we actively partner with 17 community groups from all over the state. And just recently, we helped form a statewide parent organization, Families for Strong Public Schools. In the true spirit of solidarity, smaller parent groups from all over Florida will find a common purpose and will advocate for their kids with one powerful voice. So much of FEA's infrastructure has undergone significant and essential change. For instance, the FEA Communications Department transformed its work by expanding our reach on social media, started a member-driven, education-focused podcast, I hope you've heard of it, called Educating from the Heart. And using all of the work we've done locally and we've done together, made sure that our union leaders and members are the valued experts when it comes to talking about education in Florida. In fact, today, practically no story about education in Florida is told without FEA locals and FEA members being part of it. I want to pause for a moment and recognize the 4 local presidents who just spoke about how staying connected, we can leverage our collective power for the benefit of us all. They represent another critical change happening within our movement. Kim, Ron, Janice, and Liz are 4 leaders who, like their colleagues across the state, are doing an extraordinary job of leading your local unions and building power. How about we give them all a round of applause? We've accomplished all of this and so much more, not by each of us going our own way and feeling isolated and alone, but by staying connected and moving a focused plan together. And we must do the same between now and November 8th, because the consequences of our actions or our inactions are even more dire than they were in 2010. We face the same extreme element, more powerful and more emboldened. They are certain that they can once and for all silence your voice, dismantle our public schools, and profit off of public education tax dollars, depriving our kids of the schools they need and deserve. Just think about what's being said and done by extremist lawmakers today. Consider what's being passed by elected officials, not just in our state, but in many of our locals. It's chilling when you think about the similarities to other democracies that were destroyed in the very same way. The laws passed last year were based on lies. They accuse us of doing horrific things in our schools, things that simply do not happen. People who have no connection to our schools, people who don't have relatives or even friends with children in our schools, falsely accuse you and your colleagues of wrongdoing and spread hate and distrust at local school board meetings. And they work hard to divide us, even from each other, implying that the problem is only with K-3 teachers, or it's only university professors, or it's in social studies and civics class where our children are in danger. Look at the results of last year's laws. Banning books, which limits learning opportunities and free thought. Burdening you with the bureaucratic task of reviewing every one of the hundreds of books in your classroom library. And by the way, that's going to get worse because DOE just issued a new rule around that. Telling you to take home books that you purchase specifically for your students. Considering how starved for resources and funding most schools have been over the years, I can't even imagine what reading materials will be left in most classrooms. Whitewashing the curriculum and threatening you with disciplinary action for teaching complete and honest history. Scaring you and your colleagues to a point where teachers, staff, and students who are part of the LGBTQ+ community have fewer safe places to go when needed. These divisive tactics and laws are meant to weaken our power so that they can dismantle public education, the foundation of the United States of America. I'm not trying to be overly dramatic here. This is what they are saying and doing out in the open. And if there's one thing we've learned since 2010, we should believe what they promise. The good news here is that in Florida, public schools are unionized. So we have the ability and the power in our hands to push back on all of this. But do you know the lengths that Governor DeSantis has said he will go to shut down our unions altogether? He believes he has the right to take away your voice and your power, even though we live in a state where collective bargaining is guaranteed to public employees by our Florida Constitution. But Governor DeSantis doesn't always operate by the rule of law. He wants things his way, period. Article 9 of Florida's Constitution also provides for a uniform, efficient, safe, secure, and high-quality system of free public schools. Yet, he talks about giving every parent a voucher, an education savings account, where the state will give parents something like $8,500 per kid. With it, they can homeschool their children, send them to an unaccountable voucher school, send them to a for-profit charter school, or send them to whatever's left of a public school. Not possible, you say? Can't happen? Except that's exactly what happened in the country of Chile. They dismantled public schools, gave every parent a voucher, and the results were an entire generation of lost students. And now, after their communities have fallen apart and their economy is on the brink of collapse, Chile is spending billions of dollars trying to rebuild their public school system. Is that what we want here? No. Our tax dollars are not collected solely for our individual needs. We don't pay fire departments or police only when our property and safety is compromised. Our school taxes are not paid for our individual children's education, but for the public good, for the continuation of our democracy. Public schools have been in the U.S. since 1635. And over time, they've developed into something more aspirational than any other country considered. Public education became something that gave everyone, not just the rich and connected, a shot at the American dream and gave us a path to growing national prosperity. Public education wasn't always partisan. It was supported by progressives and conservatives alike because everyone knew a public school system that educates all children well means a country brimming with intellectual know-how, able to face any challenge we may face. A well-educated public means more people can afford to feed and clothe their children without placing an undue burden on government structures. Public education is a leg up. It's not a handout. When this governor and other extremists continue to vilify teachers, staff, and professors, they are doing nothing for the public good. They minimize your value to the public. They cause division amongst ourselves, and they undermine the trust we work so hard to develop with parents, a crucial partnership if students are to fully realize their potential. So let's talk about parents for a minute. It's not by accident that those who want to destroy public education work hard to divide parents from their children's school and their children's teachers. What they hope is that parents don't see that they are the public schools just as much as the rest of us here. Heck, most of us wear both hats, parent and educator, at PTA meetings, school advisory meetings, and faculty meetings. We can attest to the fact that at almost every one of these meetings, discussions take place on how to connect parents, engage parents, and get parents to come to school. Those who seek to undermine public education don't understand that parents do the best they can for their children. That's a fact among parents from all walks of life. It's a story of the single parent who works 2 and 3 jobs, leaves for work before his child gets up in the morning, and comes home after his child goes to sleep at night. He's doing the best he can. And when his child's teacher goes that extra mile to engage him and include him, that parent appreciates his neighborhood public school, and he wouldn't think of sending his child anywhere else. But it's also the story of the parent who is fortunate enough to have a job that grants flexibility, that lets her work from home or take time off when needed. Even though she has the resources to send her children to a more prestigious private school, she knows from her own experience as a student that public schools provide a rich, diverse, and great education, especially when teachers and parents work together and communicate regularly. And this is why she often uses her flexible schedule to volunteer in the classroom and give of herself to children whose parents aren't able to volunteer. Those extremist groups can never succeed in dividing parents from their neighborhood schools if all of us, regardless of our jobs, do our part to ensure that all parents are included, respected, and invited to take part in their child's learning. But public education can be undermined and eventually destroyed if we are too tired to fight, if we allow ourselves to be divided, and if we believe the lies. This strategy has been around, been effective at least since the time of Julius Caesar. But so has the strategy of solidarity, standing together against evil. We can't keep allowing bad policies and laws to pass in our state. We must understand our collective power, help our family members and coworkers see this collective power, and over the next 26 days, elect a governor who respects our collective power. Charlie Crist has been that governor, and Charlie Crist will be that governor again. It cannot be lost on any one of us that he chose one of us, Carla Hernandez, as his running mate. And I'm happy to report that they will both be here on Saturday. Here's one of the biggest lies that continues to be spread. Charlie Crist is today a registered Democrat, but we must push back and push back hard on the narrative that we only endorse from one political party in this or any election. For us, elections are about what's good for schools and all of the people involved in public education. And because of our criteria for endorsement, which is rooted in that common value, we endorse Republicans and Democrats and independents. For example, this year, we were proud to endorse the chair of the Republican Party of Florida, Joe Gruters, in his re-election to the Florida Senate. And we also endorsed future Republican speakers of the House and future Republican Senate presidents. And we have and will endorse school board members who put kids ahead of politics and politicians, regardless of political party. Speaking of school boards, there are also crucial local races and issues on the ballot all over the state, like school funding referendum. It's important that we unite and do everything to ensure their passage, especially since the state has continued to shirk its funding obligation. Change is never easy, but change must happen. Because of bad policies and bad laws, many of you are working for lower wages today than your colleagues with the same experience were 10, even 15 years ago. But in our hands is placed a power. For many in this hall, rent has soared beyond your means, but in our hands is placed a power. Healthcare costs have shot up and benefits have been cut, but in our hands is placed a power. We can't speak up for all kids, poor and rich, gay and straight, gifted and special needs, without fear of retribution, but in our hands is placed a power. They may try to divide us, to silence us, to make us go away, but in our hands is placed a power. Who's got the power? We got the power. What kind of power? Who's got the power? What kind of power? Who's got the power? What kind of power? Now join me on this one. FVA United will never be divided. FVA United will never be divided. FVA United will never be divided. In our hands is placed a power greater than the other. Whoa, this is not way to start out. Hold on. Get some water. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the force of armies magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new day from the ashes of the old. Our union makes us strong. Everyone now. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Our union makes us strong. Have a great DA. We're going to get a lot done.